Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 53 of Rocket Lab Weekly. I'm here today with practically my co-host, Matt Farley, and the other two guys seem to have a life and they're out with their friends. And me
Losers.
and Matt, exactly, me and Matt are antisocials. We have nothing to do. So we're here with you guys. And yeah, it's been a very interesting week for the stock price, I guess, but it's not the biggest news week for Rocket Lab. But still, I want to go over the little news that happened this week, and then I want to speak about what happened in the space industry, ULA, and then I want to dissect with you the valuation of Rocket Lab, because I think that we should give some value to the satellite constellation, but I want to hear your thoughts about I want to ball some ideas on how we should calculate with that. So how has
There
your
you
week
go.
been, Mr. Matt?
It's good, man. Yeah, just trying to navigate. Things have been kind of expanding, right? With Palantir, Rocket Lab, both having pretty phenomenal returns over the past several weeks. Trying to just
Dude,
navigate, and figure out where I actually think this market is heading, right? Are we actually fizzling out? Do I think there is going to be a pullback? And if there is going to be one, am I going to make any adjustments? So, like, for example, I think people know at this point, I have a pretty substantial, not really substantial, but I have a sizable position in triple leverage NASDAQ 100. And it's like, is that the best thing to have at the peak of the market? Maybe not. Maybe I could put that in the S&P for a large pullback. And then, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I don't really think that there's going to be a next leg up, is what I'm trying to say, unless I feel some sort of something changes. So I think we're just going to be sitting here in October, and I'm trying to get a feel for where I think the market is heading right now. And I never really take profits. I normally just leave things invested, but I've kind of, what do I want to say here? In the past, like during 2022, I knew the market was going to retrace a little bit, and I left my triple leverage NASDAQ 100 invested the whole time, and it went down like 75%. So it's like, well, if I could avoid that, put it in something where I know it'll only go down 20% or 25% rather than 75 or 80, it's a win-win for everybody. But anyway, I'm a big believer in just time in the market, not timing the market. So it's tough because it goes against some of my rules. But anyway, how about your week? How was it?
the same. I did something really stupid, which I have to confess here. I bought puts on Palantir when the price went to 40.
You can't argue with that. You got to protect the goods.
Yeah, but it was like after it seemed so logical when I did it. And then after I did it, I was like, I don't think I should have done this, because I always tweet at people like, don't go against something just because it's overpriced. And yeah, I don't know. Like when Palantir hit 40, I was like, I don't know. It doesn't, like, the valuation just doesn't make sense. Even if they have a reacceleration, like I can't. And for the first time, I was like, what would happen if I would sell my position, but I was like, no, okay, I'll just buy puts, and then, if the stock goes up, I make it back on the stock price going up, and then if it goes down, then at least I'm protected a little bit. But
Well, you're kind of protected in both scenarios, right? Because you have this covered call that you're sitting on, and as do I, right? I'm not saying like I'm trying to poke you. I mean, I think I have a 33 and a $34 covered call, which I hope over time I'll be able to get myself out of, or at least be able to trim some of the value off of. But the thing that I'm thinking about is, and we had a great conversation about this on Palantir Weekly, and I don't want to make this Palantir Weekly, so no, it's Rocket Lab Weekly, but I mean, with Palantir specifically, it seems like it's being priced in for like not just even 30% year over year growth in
yeah,
Q3, but like 35%. And
yeah,
so I
yeah.
feel like you really have to knock it out of the park. And I'm not saying it's going back to 30 or anything like that, but I do anticipate there's going to be a large pullback for two reasons, right? October 31st is currently what Robinhood has slated is the Q3 earn. It comes out October 31st. I don't know. It's generally the Tuesday or Monday first week, Monday, and in the second month, right? So there's that. And then second, I think right now you're having a lot of institutional buyers coming in. And I think the other reason why I could say that is because you have Carp, you have Teal, you have many other insiders selling, coupled with a lot of retail selling at these prices. But yet the price has gone from 36 to 40. So that means you have massive tailwinds pushing into this, while you have people literally selling billions of dollars worth in the opposite direction. So you have a lot of demand.
Never
and it's
seen anything
outweighing
like
the
this.
current supply. Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I could see it that's comparable is when Tesla joined the S&P. But other than that, I anticipate at the end of October, I'm anticipating you're probably going to see it. But it could get to like $42. I wouldn't be surprised with the momentum and the institutional buying. I guess it all just depends on who's selling and what.
Yeah. Cool. So Rocket Lab Weekly. So maybe we go into the Rocket Lab news of the week, of which there was not many. One of the news was them showing a new part of Neutron being done. So we have seen quite a lot of parts of Neutron being done. I don't follow if we have all the parts. I don't even know all the parts, but I just know that this drawing has had a lot of parts. I would guesstimate that probably like 80-90% is done. I am quite confident, despite the allegations, and we're going to speak about the allegations, that we are moving toward an assembled Neutron in the next few months on some sort of a pad. What is your take on the allegations on Neutron, and what do you think is the timeline for the first launch?
Man, timeline. I still think we're on the same timeline. I mean, I know there's some FUD out there that specifically is targeting that. They're lying through their teeth, and they're not actually demonstrating the key milestones that they need to demonstrate in order to have a successful vehicle be launched by June, July of 2025. I think that, if they were going to lie through their teeth, right, why would they have already pushed it back, right? It doesn't make sense to, you know what I mean?
In the allegations, they said that they're lying to investors, but they're disclosing it to customers, and that's why they don't have contracts. Please make that make sense. Like, shouldn't it be that you're lying to customers so that you can get contracts, so you dupe the investors with?
Yeah,
is it?
It doesn't make sense, right? So I don't know. I like to listen to everything, but it just seems one of those things that, like, I don't think that Peter and Adam would hide. I think that they would be honest, and they have stated that it is a rocket. It is literally a rocket launch, so it could move, but at the moment they're still forecasting for mid 2025. So, and I don't see any, like, with all the milestones I've seen, like the hot fire tests with the tanks that are actually starting to come out. I don't see why it would be trending more than 9 months from now. But then again, I've never built a rocket before, so that's kind of hearsay. And what do I know? I'm a petroleum engineer, not an aeronautical or aerospace engineer. So I honestly don't know. I don't have that experience, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I did a deep dive into the allegations, and some of you can check the video on the channel if you want to spend I think it was like a 20-something minute video. It was very, very detailed. And all I can say is somebody spent a lot of time putting these papers together and these allegations. And I don't think any of the documents are faked that are in it, but everything is highlighted to only show the worst possible scenario. Like, let me give you examples. Like, the document highlights that Neutron doesn't have an environmental okay, and the environmental survey is going to be probably done in December 2025. So this guy is saying that it's impossible that Neutron would launch before that. But in the same document, if you read a little bit lower, like, he highlights this, and then if you read literally like 2 lines lower, it says that Virginia Space has like an emergency authority to like authorize a single launch. if the environmental survey is not ready, right?
Yeah.
So I really did a deep dive on it, and nothing in the papers was like there is valid barriers that is pointed out, but nothing that doesn't have workarounds that cannot easily be handled. So I think like the only thing is that somebody spent really a lot of time compiling this and leaking it and calling it the neutron document.
But these things can be taken out of context, right? Like I write engineering documents all the time, and have part of delivering big facilities that are on, critical path sort of activities that might have a window of delivery of 6 months to a year. And you always write in the risks, right? You always write in what's the environmental risk. You always write in what's the risk to delivery, because these executives are writing $500 to $1 billion contracts in some cases. So I hope nobody's reading the 10K or the 10Q, because if you want to look at some risks, there's some crazy ones in there. Like, so if you want to take these things out of context, you could easily put together a page and be like, Rocket Lab just published this, and that's truth. But taken out of context, is it actually meaning what you want it to be, right? So it's about, engineering is what it is, right? There's always quantifying some sort of risks or uncertainties based off of what you can or can't control. And I think that the environmental piece fits right into it. I'm not saying I know anything more than anybody else, but I think it's for people that might not necessarily have been writing some of these documents that you have to submit to government agencies. That sort of stuff gets written in there because it's a risk, and they need to have preparation plans in play for some of these things, right? And so it's not to say that it's going to happen, but in the 5% or 1% chance that there's an environmental problem, you need to have specific regulatory agencies on standby or in the know, or you need to know what phone number to call if something does happen. So it's one of those things where it's just part of, what good regulatory bodies do, whether it's the FAA, whether it's the environmental bodies. So I anticipate it's probably something like that, where that got leaked and people are taking it out of context. Kind of like how they were talking about how, the Archimedes engine was only fired for a couple seconds, right? And they had only done like one or two single couple second test fires, right? And it's like, what kind of hearsay is this, right?
Yeah. And again, like another thing is like, I cannot find the source of this report, right? And a lot of people have said what I have seen online is that it's from a government official who is supposed to keep the other offices informed of neutron readiness, like for the national security launches and whatever. But the weird thing is that this supposed government official did like a readiness check, and then parts of the document was like interviews combined, like excerpts from interviews that was done, between Eric Berger and Peter Beck. And I'm in the building industry, right? Like, if you want to know if a construction or a program is moving as planned, you send out inspectors who are, experts at the area. They take pictures and they say that the pad is 80% done. They are on, step 9, pouring concrete, and they have poured this many liters, and like you would never check the readiness of anything by listening to interviews of, what the CEO have said. I don't know if you guys do that in your field of work. Like if somebody's asking like, how much until this oil rig is finished, and then they're like, what did the CEO of BP say about it, or whatever. I just named an oil company. You work at UDoc.
Okay, I think everybody knows at this point. But yeah, it's it's not too hard, right? I literally have my name all over the internet. People can literally look it up on LinkedIn. So yeah, I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, I think a lot of people take some of these things out of context. But yeah, it's one of those things where, people can create some sort of illusion to try to create some sort of FUD, and I don't know if it's necessarily to try to get recognition, but listen, I only really listen to the source, and I have yet to have any sort of reason to not believe Peter and them. And so
my advice is, if these allegations make you question your Rocket Lab investment. You have not done enough due diligence, and you either need to sell your shares ASAP, or you need to get your homework done to earn the right to keep your shares. Did you see that I did this survey of on Twitter? Let me see if I can quickly find it, of how many people was affected by these leaks, and 4 or 5%, and it was like hundreds of people answered that they sold because of this. I mean, that's like 30-40 people who exited Rocket Lab. Let me see if I can quickly find it. And another like big percentage said that they how do you call it, like that they, like, it makes them worried. What is all these random tweets? I have a bot now, by the way, that copies me.
I'm a bot.
You're a bot. So here it is. Look, 484 answers, and 5.6% of them sold Rocket Lab because of the allegations, and 18%, what is that? That's like almost 80 people worried about their Rocket Lab position because of these allegations. So I think those people have not done their homework and due diligence correctly.
I mean, I'm gonna make a bad joke in poor taste, right? Because apparently I have everybody and their mom trying to catch me saying something stupid that they can use against me on X. But it's probably some kid in their parents' basement that didn't get enough shares, and he has 5 and he wants to get to 10 shares. So he's really like putting in the time so that he can try to get some sort of FUD to get people to sell. And there you go. He got it. If he was smart, he was able to get it at like what, $8 or $9 before it went back to $10. So there you go.
I mean, I thought first that it might be like a lobbyist, who is lobbying is trying to create doubt before they get onboarded to the NSSL program. But when I was reading the documents, I'm like, there's no serious competent government official who would be influenced by this, right? Because they would also not judge the readiness by interviews. So I also came to that it has to be someone who is either a short seller or is interested in buying at lower prices. I don't have any, but they spent weeks to compile this, like very serious time. So they were either paid for it or they were expecting some real nice payoff from it.
Yeah.
Cool. We go to the next one. I mean, it's not even really news. It's just we have a fireside chat with what is this Payload podcast. And this is an in-person event that is coming. It's in November 13 in Los Angeles. Peter is going to be there in person. I just hope that it's somehow going to be published after, or you can buy it or whatever. I hate this, that there is like a Peter interview in the wild that we somehow don't get access to. So this is happening in Rocket Lab world. And then we have this mysterious event that is in, 6 days?
Yeah.
On Bloomberg Technology, where they are going to be doing something from headquarters, and there is ideas floating around that is some new announcement or new contract announcement, or I don't know what the heck it is. What do you think it is?
Man, I don't really know. Maybe they'll. I don't know. I really don't. I mean, the only thing that would really move the opportunity, meaning Rocket Lab as a whole, would be some sort of announcement about the mega constellation. But I don't know. You have to think there is 5 days left, right? So they could have something planned where they're going to announce it. When does that mean? That means Wednesday of next week? No, it's It's Friday next week.
Are we live streaming this?
Good question. If I'm home on Friday, then yes.
Let
me think. I mean, I think
access to this.
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, they have all week, so they could they could announce something literally on Monday, Tuesday, whether it's some sort of acquisition or whether it's whatever, and then they could go into full detail and have a bigger rendezvous with maybe say some of the co-CEOs or the CEOs in general showing up at headquarters talking about the deal. But that's literally pure speculation. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be something, but it can also just be that, I don't know, Bloomberg Technology wants to be in a space company so that they can have a nice background that says, hey, we are in a rocket factory. Can be very benign. It can be very market moving. And I don't know. I also have no clue what to think.
It could be, yeah. I mean, I've seen small snippets here or there where Peter's gotten, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes on a CNBC, but I've never seen a legit special, right, being given to these guys. So it could just be, hey, these guys are actually important. They seem like they're actually moving. They're executing. They're here to stay. You know, let's give them a special. Like, so it could just be the fact that, you know, just publicity, right, and getting people out and just doing some road shows. Yeah.
So we're gonna have to just wait and see, and maybe we will be live streaming this one. That was all the news for Rocket Lab. Again, this was a very quiet week, so if you guys who are only here for Rocket Lab want to leave, it's fine by me. I want to go through a little bit of space news, and then I want to just talk Rocket Lab valuation with Matt, because you're not good with numbers, and maybe your opinion is good. Yeah. You're not.
I'm far from good with numbers, that's for sure.
Exactly. So we go through the space news really quick. So there has been another malfunction of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket.
I didn't see that. When was this?
Yeah, in the last few days. This is their third one this year, and they're grounded until they find out what has happened. And basically what has happened is a stage 2 after deployment failed to deorbit in the expected area. So like it deorbited outside of where they plan to deorbit it. Here it is. The upper stage malfunction apparently occurred after the Falcon 9 successfully deployed SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft carrying NASA astronaut Nick Hogg and Russian cosmonaut Alexander Grubanov on SpaceX Crew 9 mission. The Falcon 9 second stage Merlin vacuum engine fired for more than 6 minutes to place the Crew Dragon spacecraft into orbit after liftoff. The engine was supposed to reignite later to steer the upper stage on a trajectory back into Earth's atmosphere for disposal over the South Pacific Ocean, ensuring the doesn't rocket remain as orbiting space junk. And then basically it failed to arrive in that area, and SpaceX is not launching until they figure out what happened. I mean, I don't know if you have any comments on this. I guess the only thing I can say to this is just it highlights why you need more than one provider. So these type of incidents are kind of good for Rocket Lab. Yeah, I don't know if you have any comments on this.
I mean, it just goes to show you, right? It's legitimate rocket science, and it's not as easy as doing it successfully once. It requires a lot of precision and a lot of care. I'd be curious to see if these are really one-off events that you could be like, you know what, because they launched at such a cadence now, and we were talking about this in the past, where you have these things like kind of like what happened with the Rocket Lab Electron in September last year, where you had that anomaly. It's like, who would have thought that you'd have an arcing with, you know, and then some sort of sparking which would short out, you know, something. So in that respect, it makes you think a little bit like how many of these things are something that could have been prevented versus how much of these things that are just inherent design flaws that need to be rectified based off of uncertainties that we don't necessarily or can't quantify. And so I'm curious to see. I don't know the answer. I haven't done enough due diligence on it, but I am kind of curious if it's like one of these things where they missed a bolt or they didn't precisionally like match something to the appropriate amount of precision that they needed to. So anyway, just some food for thought.
Yeah, I read an article that said, that Falcon 9 is in uncharted waters because there is certain, like if you look at cars and airplanes, like there is certain issues that, happen in 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, right? But there is no rockets that have had such a cadence as Falcon 9, right? So Falcon 9 is coming into this like 1,000-ish, launches and reuses. So you start to have things occur that is like 1 in 1,000 chance of happening because you have such a big cadence, right? And obviously these things make the rocket launch itself safer because just like with the Electron, they start to find like these weird freakish incidents.
Yeah.
But you're also correct that we don't know if this was like some guy didn't have his morning coffee and he forgot the bolt, or it was a legitimate 1 in 1,000.
And I don't know if it was a reused vessel. Was it reused to the 19th time, or was it a brand new one? Right? Like I don't know these.
Stage 2. Stage 2 is brand new always, right?
Oh, okay. Well, stage 2. That's right. You did mention that. Okay. Yeah, I anticipate, stage 2 because I think it's really only the first stage that they always try to land and reuse. So sorry, you mentioned that. I didn't think about that.
No problem. Okay, we go on to the next one, which is the certification flight for ULA Vulcan, which had this very interesting. I don't know if you guys caught it, where one of the solid rocket booster engines, apparently the bell on it blew up. I don't know if I tried to show the exact point, and there you see it. I don't know if you guys could see it. And apparently the rocket's software was able to correct the route, and the rocket made it into the intended orbit, and everything ended up being perfect. The rocket ride just took a little bit longer because it had a little bit less thrust. And this one was not grounded by the FAA, and the way I understood it, this launch was certified and everything is A-okay. And the ULA has a lot of flights booked for this machine or this rocket, which could seem to be a Rocket Lab competitor. So any thoughts on this happening, Mr. Matt?
When you say Rocket Lab competitor, I just want to clarify the Vulcan you're saying could be a competitor because it could compete against Neutron, meaning it's a slightly larger vehicle. I would say it's more in the realm of a large vehicle than a medium vehicle. Or wait, no, maybe I'm thinking of a different vehicle. Hold on, let me double check. I could be mixing up.
No, you're right. Like
let's double check.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think they're about comparable in terms of size.
They're the same size, but I think it slightly has more like Neutron has, what is it, 17,000 kilograms to Leo, and this one, if I'm not mistaken, is 20 plus, like 20,000 plus to Leo.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I think I was thinking about the Delta 4. So anyway, going back to what you were talking about, I mean, I'm curious to see what kind of cadence these guys get off, right? Because this is the second launch. I think they did the first launch, was it January, December last year? When was it? Vulcan initial launch was January 8th. Okay, so it's been about 10 months. So that's actually pretty impressive. I wasn't expecting them to turn around and do a second launch this year. I was actually pretty surprised because I wasn't expecting the Vulcan to be relaunching sometime. I was expecting 2025. So it's cool to see. ULA making a big turnaround and getting something off in 10 months. It's good work on them. In terms of what I think stuff happens. I think it's not going to damage anything per se. It is something that it can be worrisome though, because somebody posted something on X, and once again, I haven't done my due diligence to know how real it is, but something comparable happened in like a 1994 launch, and it did not go to favor, right? And ended up derailing the entirety of the launch, and unfortunately, it did not get to orbit. So it's nice to see that. I don't know if it's just luck or if it was the flight software, like you stated, that I was able to kind of make that correction and get it back into trajectory for orbit. So, yeah, congrats to Mr. Bruno and everybody at ULA.
Yeah, and again, I just want to say here, because I myself was thinking, I don't know if I can share the tweet here. My computer is a bit funny currently. It's not showing the tweets that I had, but apparently they're planning 10 launches next year, and people were asking Tony Bruno, who is Dave Huntsman, when you say the Vulcan is next size up from Neutron, do you mean that the Vulcan is a heavy launch vehicle and the Neutron is a medium, or you mean that Vulcan is like a bigger size medium? But back to what I was saying. So it said that it has like 20 sold launches, and they're planning to launch 10 times next year. And I was thinking, like, damn, that's a lot of launches. And is this taking away from Rocket Lab? And then I realized that these launches, they were sold like many years ago. And many of them are government. The other part is the Amazon Kuiper constellation that is trying to get up to space, and they're and then I realized that when Neutron comes online, it will be much more competitive than the ULA's Vulcan, like price wise, I think everything wise. So it's not really a competition, but it's nice to see other rocket companies launching.
Yeah, so Dave's confirming what I did originally think. So it is, we're talking about something that can get 27,000 kilograms, so almost twice as much as the Neutron. If you're talking about reusability, now the Neutron could be like closer to 15 or 17,000 kilograms if you're talking about non-reusability. But that's another thing, is the Vulcan at the moment not reusable. $100 million estimated minimum launch cost. So when you're talking about the Falcon 9, that's probably about 30% cheaper to launch, plus reusability. And then when you're talking about Neutron, you're talking about half as much, $55 million a launch is kind of the current estimated price. But once again, half the lifting capability. So while they are the same size, I think the Vulcan might be a little wider than what I'm maybe giving credit for. So it is, it is able to lift a little bit more.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Neutron is medium. Vulcan is heavy. Okay. I thought that they were still considered medium, like both the sizes. It's just one was like low and the other one was high. But okay, I get it. Cool. Now we move on to the next one. I mean, I just wanted to show it just as an interesting thing that according to Tony Bruno, the company has spent between 5 to 7 billion to develop the Vulcan rocket. And even Dave G is saying here that this is not apples to apples, but the Rocket Lab is looking like it is going to be a 300 million budget, which is nuts when you compare it to other rockets.
I think Tori does a good job, and I think one of the things that Smarter Every Day had a really good video with them walking through the ULA rocket making factory, and it's pretty mind blowing because they actually were able to get a pretty decent amount of volume off at the Delta 4 factory, and you have to think they're making something that's a magnitude larger than the Electron. So the Electron you can kind of put in a single warehouse and like stack them, versus when you're talking about putting some of these big boys together, a little bit harder to do it in a smaller warehouse, right? You have to have big boy warehouses at that point. So if anybody has an hour or two to blow later after Rocket Lab Weekly, be sure to check out that. I'll hand it
Yeah,
back to you and you can get the link.
I realized something because of the rocket equation. It's like 97% of the mass of the rocket is the fuel and the rocket itself, and only 3% is the payload. So that means that to go from a payload of 17 or like 300 kilograms to 27,000, it's like the payload goes 100x, but the rocket is like exponentially big. Like it's not 100x bigger, because it's like 100 times 30 big. Yeah. So I'm not good at math, as you can see, but I hope the audience understand what I'm trying to say. So the difference is not scaling like linearly. So if you have a 300 kilogram rocket in Electron and you have a 1,000 kilogram rocket, like let's say the Alpha of Firefly, then the weight of the rocket is probably like 90 times as big. Can that be? Based on my numbers, that should be the case. Yeah, anyways, we're not rocket engineers here.
Yeah, I'm not that smart.
Cool. Okay, so here's the next one, which I know very little about. Things between ASTS and SpaceX are getting heated. I bet they want to secure a new launch provider ASAP. Again, this shows why the monopoly in space is not so healthy. So ASTS is launching a satellite constellation that is trying to do direct to cell phone mobile service providing, and that is their whole business. And they are launching on SpaceX, which is a launch provider, and they have their own competing constellation called Starlink. And technically, I don't understand what they're arguing about. Like, what I understand about is SpaceX is using a kind of frequency that can be considered noise, and it can make it harder for other cell phone providers to, yeah. And I don't know if you know more about this. We're struggling today at the engineering parts. But there is a fight between SpaceX and ASTS, and it's looking interesting.
Competition is normal, man. You don't want a monopoly, and I think that's why it's such a good time to have something like a Neutron coming out to the market, because one, what if something actually major happens, right? I'm fortunate, nobody's been hurt so far on a Falcon 9 or anything of the like, but who knows? FAA might, if they continue to have some sort of quality control problems, like I said, that could be me just being completely ignorant. I don't necessarily know exactly what's been going on over at SpaceX, so take whatever I say with a grain of salt. But let's just say they ground them for a lot longer of time. Well, what if there's something that's mission critical? Like, what if there's something that is comparable to the Starliner leaving those two astronauts up in the space station, and we need to get somebody sooner, right? So it gets back to having two potential backup plans. And there's also a different focus at SpaceX, right? While the Falcon 9 pays the bills at the moment, the real focus is Mars. So it's who's to know that eventually, if Falcon 9, I don't want to say will be discontinued, but at some point, there's going to be a lot less focus on the Falcon 9 aspect of things and more focus on the Mars aspect of things. So it just gets you to think a little bit when it comes to what are the true priorities versus Rocket Lab at the moment has no ambition to go to Mars from a people movement perspective. Will they send satellites and maybe they'll send vessels? Maybe, but from a people movement perspective, probably not, unless there's more money in it for them or something like that. They're very profitability driven, which I admire. So in that respect, I think that their biggest focus right now is getting Neutron up and running and at least trying to take some of the market share away from the Falcon 9.
Yeah. Thank God someone in the comments saved me and confirmed that my math was, I was thinking correctly on my math. Okay, so we didn't totally suck on the engineering today. Um, yeah. So, and it's a very nice segue because we, as we spoke on last Rocket Lab Weekly, everybody currently that we follow values Rocket Lab based on their space systems and their rocket launch, and nobody that we know actually assigns any value to them based on their future constellation. And we were talking about that probably the reason why or one of the reasons why the price of Rocket Lab jumped so much recently is because of ASTS. And that is a company that has zero revenue. Actually, it's not true. They have some revenue, but they're, is it ASTS that is open here? Yeah, ASTS. Their price to sales is almost 3,000. So practically they have no revenue, and they are currently worth $4 billion on the idea that they will do a constellation. So I think that it's not prudent for us to put zero on the future constellation of Rocket Lab, but because we don't really have any directions, I want to think out loud and hear your thoughts on Matt, if you think this is a BS idea or not, and if you think that we should give some credit to Rocket Lab for their future plans. How would we incorporate that into our valuation to find out what is the fair value of Rocket Lab?
I mean, that's difficult to say what fair value is, right? It all depends on what time horizon you're looking at. It all depends on what's included, what's not included, what assumptions you. To me, I think that if you go back to its simplest form, going from what's a worthless rocket company valued at versus what SpaceX is valued at, that gets you in a realm of anywhere between 200 or 0 to 210 billion at the moment, right? That's kind of the range that you're looking at. So I could see plenty of opportunities being out there that people are making CGIs and claiming they have a rocket company and putting things on YouTube, like I've seen the other day. I'm trying to get people excited on how to invest in their CGI rocket launches taking off on YouTube videos. And then you have obviously SpaceX, which is worth $210 billion. So I think when you go and you want to preface, okay, so what is a mega constellation worth? I would say in its long-term view at the moment, with how SpaceX has done with their constellation being Starlink, I think you could say it's worth about $50 billion right now at its current peak valuation to date, right? Not to say that it won't grow to 75 or 100, it hasn't been spun off. It hasn't been elaborated as to what kind of profits or anything that it makes, at least that not I've seen. So I think that there's potential that a constellation that's in that realm could fetch $50 billion if done appropriately and done well. Now, getting back to what is Rocket Lab currently worth, it's hard to quantify, right? Do you want to quantify it off of what revenue it makes today, what profit? If you're going off of profit, people would probably say it's worth nothing because there is no profit. And if you were to say, well, are you taking the profit of the entire group? Are you taking the profitability of just the launch business? Are you taking the profitability of the current space systems business? Are you doing it inclusive of the expenses associated with Neutron, without the expenses of Neutron? So it goes back to, well, why are we evaluating Rocket Lab the way that we're evaluating Rocket Lab today? And so it gets back to, I think right now, without having an appropriate Neutron rocket ready to launch, I think we're at a fair valuation. Would I be running out and buying as many shares as I can? No. But at the same time, I already have 20-some thousand shares. So if it was me and I'm sitting on the sidelines being like, oh, wow, this could be something that's worth 25, $50 billion, maybe even on the high side up to 100, and let's say the next 10 to 15 years, I would at least wet my beak and get some money in. I can't think of a time within the next 6 months to a year where prices will dip drastically from where they are today. And if they do, it might stay there for a couple months. The thing and the reason why I say a couple months is we only have 9 months at the moment, based off of what we know, until the Neutron launch. Within there, you're going to have sprinkles of new deals, whether that's $1 billion, $500 million deal coming from NASA or the Space Development Agency or whatever, or you're going to have quarterly earnings reports coming out. Quarterly earnings aren't going to slow down. In the underlying business, Electron Space Systems isn't going to slow down. So that alone next year, I anticipate it's going to have a 40% year-over-year increase alone without any sort of revenue coming from Neutron. So in that respect, people are like, oh my God, these guys are still growing. And not only that, but they have potential to have Neutron coming in at $50 million to $55 million a pop. It makes you start wondering, right? What is the true valuation? So for right now, I think that we're appropriately valued. Once you get a Neutron launched up in the air, the valuation should at least double, and get closer to $15 a share, in my opinion.
But okay, just a question on this, because I agree with you. Also, in my calculation, fair value is between 8-ish, 8 to 10. But when you say that Neutron is launched, then the price should double, which I also agree with. But based on what? Is it based on because then they're going to work on the constellations next, or based on like what would you like? How would you quantify that for like finance nerds?
Sorry, what was the question?
Like when you say that Neutron launch would double the valuation, right? Which like a successful Neutron launch, because then like we will start getting Neutron contracts, and like what I'm saying is what do you base that valuation on? Like saying that is it that the revenue is going to increase so much, or there is like risk that has been taken out of the stock, or is it that we are like when Neutron launches, it means that space is open for Rocket Lab and they can work on the constellation, and you're beginning to price in their own constellation? Or that's a little bit what I'm after.
It's a multitude of things. Mopbox said it. There's risk falling off. That are they actually going to be able to do it? There's a lot of people that obviously think they can't. Hopefully more people think they can than they can't, because I've seen them do it with Electron now 53 times. I know it's a different vehicle, but they know what they're doing. They've executed. Second, it's a huge OpEx relief for the company. Now they don't have to feed and support it on its own. Keep in mind, there were some subsidies to be able to get Neutron built, but the majority of it was primarily out of the pocket of Rocket Lab. And so once that's kind of over that hump, you're looking towards, okay, when profitability, when island, right? That's kind of the next thing that you're looking at. It's no longer when Neutron, like it has been for the last 3 years. It's when profitability. And so that kind of puts you in a different maturity stage of the company. And so there's that piece. And then thirdly, I think it's coupled with what kind of contracts are you going to get? What kind of revenue are you going to get from that? Because that, while it might not get anything the first time, unless somebody wants to pay full price, $55-60 million for the launch. I think that there's a huge opportunity for future revenue growth, but there's also going to be the underlying revenue growth of Electron and Space Systems, etc., HASTE as well, in 2025. And then third, or lastly, maybe, I had it on the tip of my tongue. What was it? It was I'll leave it there. It was something kind of crunchy, but yeah.
Okay. So I want to check something with you, because I totally agree with you, but I have a Rocket Lab model, and somehow I want to put the constellation into that model. And we have gotten some clues. So, Adam Spice said that they are going to take multiple shots at, so it's not like one thing that they're going to try. It's like multiple things that they're going to try. He said that it's a revenue opportunity of more than 100 million, and hopefully a lot more than 100 million. And you know, that then I started doing a little bit of research, like as you said, like, okay, what is Starlink worth? I also heard some whisper numbers that it might be worth even 120 million, billion, sorry, not million. And you know, I started looking like other SPAC companies, like for example Redwire, which is a non-profitable company just turning profitable. They have a price to sales, because they're a pure constellation company, right? So I was like, maybe if you would look at like what are the pure constellation companies worth, and then you know, you find like, okay, they're usually around this P or this price to sale, then you can use that in your Rocket Lab model. And I mean, like the Starlink price to sales is something insane. Like it has to be something like a 30 or something like that. Then I found like Iridium, which is an older satellite company that is actually profitable. They have a price to sales of 5. And Redwire, which was like 1.2. So you like, I have these data points, right? Like you have like 30, 5, and then you know. So I think that Rocket Lab would be reasonable to count with, you know, between 5 to 10 price to sales. So that means that if they find a satellite opportunity that adds 200 million a year at a 5 price to sales, then it should add $1 billion to the valuation. If it's 10 price to sales, it should add $2 billion to the valuation, right? And then if they're going to try to do 3 of these opportunities, then it's between 3 to 6 billion that should be added in the valuation. And if it's between, you know, 27 to 2030, you know, then you can discount that back into PT, and then you can get a you know, like an approximation of how it changes the stock price. And I have 2 problems with it. One is I feel like it's a lot of speculation, and number 2, I feel it very much changes the fair value of what the company is today. So this is why I wanted to hear your thoughts about this. Like, do you think it would be crazy to think like this and build a model like that, or yeah?
The thing I wanted to say that was crunchy was there's also no medium or heavy launch vehicle at the moment, except maybe for New Glenn, that can be reusable other than the Falcon 9. So that was another piece that I think will add to the market cap of the organization. But going back to your question with respect to the constellation piece, I think that massively undervalues the potential. Maybe I'm overthinking the potential size of a constellation. I think somebody in the chat said they're not really going to build a mega constellation, just rather a constellation of stuff. But I mean, even 100 million, or sorry, even 100 satellites or a couple hundred satellites requires a decent amount of revenue to kind of make sense of. So it would need to be, you know, a couple $100 million a year for it to potentially make sense. So I don't know. I don't know what kind of margins it's going to have as well. I started to try to poke Adam on that last time. I don't think they've gotten to that point yet where they're comfortable releasing to the public what their thoughts are. One, about the constellation in general, and then 2, what kind of margins, without actually having solid plans. If they have them, maybe they have inklings of a plan. Shout out Donald Trump, but they don't. Yeah. Anyway, I'll just leave it there because I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, all I know is that what do you call it? That the other satellite companies, for example, ASTS, they're you know, you can see the margins that they're planning, and I think it's like over 50% in their presentations. Starlink is similar. You can look at Iridium as a company. Like these are very, like, the satellite constellation business is very expensive to get started, but once your assets are in space, they almost cost no money to run. So I mean, I agree with you. We didn't get any pointers out of Rocket Lab, but if we compare them to the other companies, it should be a very, very profitable an endeavor. And regarding on the size of the opportunity, I think I agree with you and disagree with you at the same time, because the broadband internet or communications is a very big TAM, and if you go into that market, like, I believe that you can have billions of dollars of revenue, right? But for example, if you go into Earth observation or some of these more niche markets, that opportunity is not that big, right? And based on the communications that we've heard from Rocket Lab, it seemed like that they would test a few niche markets out. Like maybe they wouldn't go into a crowded market like Starlink, because it requires also a lot of capital, and maybe it would be unnecessary risk for the company. So where I agree with you is, I think that the reason why they're going to get a lot of revenue is because they're going to be in a lot of smaller niches at the same time. Like they have a very easy time to expand out the niches, but I'm not sure that they will have like one constellation that is like like a $10 billion or $30 billion constellation.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, this was like very interesting. It's a bit dry, as Adam said. It's a very math, and very very nerdy number stuff, but sometimes it's needed. I think I'm going to do a dedicated video on the channel with more thoughts on future satellite valuation, and maybe you can watch it and trash it in the comments, like tell me where I was wrong.
No, I don't think I would trash it. I just am not. I don't know. You have ASTS, which is you have to put a satellite into space, being worth $4 billion, and then you have the entirety of the Rocket Lab business being worth, $5 billion. So it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think that as investors, like, we have to, like, I understand it was prudent to, like, when Rocket Lab was at $4, right? It was very prudent that you looked at, like, okay, just the launch business and just the satellite manufacturing is worth $8. So this is like a screaming deal, right? And that's when we were buying, right? But now when the stock is between the $8 to $10, and you have, exactly as you said, ASTS with zero revenue worth $4 billion just on the idea of constellation, I'm like, is it still correct to give zero on the constellation? And I'm like, I think we should give something. Like, I don't think we should give 10 billion, but I want to find something that makes sense. And it's very tough because we didn't get a lot of pointers from, we don't know what they're going into, how many satellites, what's the profit margin, what's the timeline, so it's tough. But I think we should do something, like some credit they need to get for it.
Very good.
Cool. Well, I think this was the episode for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it, despite it was a bit of a numbers, drier one. But I see a lot of comments about Andril and space, and I don't know. Do you know anything about that? People seem to be really excited about maybe a partnership with Rocket Lab.
Yeah, I think that they noted there would be a potential movement into space, and so I think if people immediately go into the realm of, oh, that means they're going to be working with Rocket Lab, because I'm not 100% certain, but I don't know.
Yeah, but you haven't heard any, like, I mean, it can be any space company. That's also what I understood. So I don't know why people jump to the conclusion that it has to be Rocket Lab.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, why specifically Rocket Lab? Why not SpaceX? Why not Blue Origin? I haven't seen anything in particular to say that it's strictly going to be Rocket Lab, other than people's speculation.
Here's a question for you. Are you taking any profits?
No.
Same here.
I Yeah, I might take profits elsewhere, not Palantir, not Rocket Lab, but I just think we're too early in the game. I think this is my highest conviction stock. If I were to be adding anywhere, it would probably be here. Not at this price particularly, but just the stock. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's going to be $15 by the end of next year. So it just doesn't make sense to sell when it right now it's about a $200,000 position for me. It would be about 300,000 at the end of next year, and it to me, I think it'll eventually go to closer to what is it? Yeah, closer to 50 billion. Sorry, yeah, $50 a share. Not in the next 2 years or anything like that, but eventually it'll get to $50 a share, probably the next 15 years or so.
Yeah. Same here. I'm also not even thinking about taking profits. Palantir was a bit tricky because I don't know, the price is just very, very high. But I would say that Rocket Lab has gone from very undervalued to fair value without the constellation. So there's zero reason for me to even look at taking profits. But at the same time, I would not be surprised if next week we are doing Rocket Lab Weekly and the price is back in the 8s, or 3 weeks from now. Because, okay, you're a lot more experienced investor than me. I've never seen like a bull run like we have had in the last few months. It's like I cannot believe where the market can. Like I always think now pullback must be coming, and then it goes higher, and then I'm like, okay, now it's coming, and then it goes higher. I've never seen a bull run that is this resilient.
I think 2021 was more resilient, but I think the thing that I'm recognizing is I think a lot of people underestimated the ability for a company like Palantir to maintain their expenses as they grew. And I'm curious to see as Rocket Lab gets closer to profitability and then exceeds, how quickly can we get, because we know we're at a 30% gross margin for space systems and Electron. I don't know what the gross margins are aiming for HASTE. I have yet to kind of know that piece, but let's just say on a net margin basis, we end up at 15 to 20%. Who knows, how quickly we're going to get there, right? And I'm not 100% certain as to how much the OpEx is going to grow as Neutron grows, right? Is there a lot of the, excuse me, is there a lot of the factories and infrastructure in place, and now it's really about just getting the throughput that you need from Electron and Neutron to make it as most profitable as you can? Because you think about it, when they talk about that 30% gross margin, they're not taking into account the S&GA, right? The sales, general, administrative costs. So that has to be taken off at that point, and that's when you get left with your net margin. So my question is to, I guess, them as we get closer to profitability, what can we expect? And is there a world where we can get to a 20-25% net income margin? Because if you start thinking about it from that perspective, I could see a world in a couple of years' time where at about $3 billion, depending on how many Neutron rockets we launch. But let's just say we get to a comparable cadence here in 6 years' time as we do for the Electron. That's $500 million alone in Neutron launches, so maybe even call it $600 million. And then next year alone, you're going to be making $600 million in just space systems and Electron launches. So let's say that business grows to about $1 billion. And if they're able to walk away, 1.6 to $2 billion in revenue in, say, the next 5 years' time, which I think is slightly conservative, and you're able to walk away with a 20% net income margin on that, well, that's when you start looking at the fact that this should be a 10 to $15 billion company rather easily. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
Cool. On this
Those are
note,
some very high level numbers. So,
yeah, I like them. So, on this note, I think it's a good point to end for tonight. Thanks for everyone for being here, and I'll see everyone next week and during the week.
Yeah, thank you for the invite.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.